His name is Ogama, if I got it right. He's a senior lecturer at Nelson Mandela University. He will take us through this morning on sequencing state building and political development, the case of South Sudan. All of us are eager to listen to issues about South Sudan. So, bro, we are in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Let me know once you have the presentation. Good morning, colleagues. So this presentation is based on observations made on South Sudan. I'm now battling with my own preview here. Okay, let me use it from Dropbox. I did some work for the UNDP in South Sudan, and the study was very clear that we had to investigate ways in which South Sudan could federalize. Part of the revitalized agreement on the cessation of hostilities in South Sudan was based on one of the agreement in the cessation of hostilities was to have a federal state. Now this is interesting because it's a further development from South Sudanese politicians' attempts to make sure that there's a dispersed power distribution model that allows many of them to have many sites from which to extract in the final analysis. And if we follow the story of South Sudan from, or maybe let me just, in the next slide, and the other one. If we follow the story of South Sudan, we will see that from 1805 to 1999, there was a very unique colonialism taking place there, which was a sort of collaboration between the British and the Egyptians in terms of control over Sudan, the Greater Sudan. Now, what was interesting is that they developed a political schism between the Arab North and the African South. But the issue here is that both the Arab North and the African South were in fact African mostly, but with changes in what was regarded as Arabization, fears that with the Christian South feeling that the Arabs and Muslims were having too great a control over the obviously then what happens is that in 1954, I think, just a year before the war began, so there was some independence, but at independence, what happens was that a civil war broke out of differences in the army, and the Anyanya One struggle ensued. This Anyanya One struggle was led by politicians from the south who were fighting for recognition of southern politicians in the United Army of South Sudan. So that war takes place until so this struggle was led by Joseph Lagu and others who were pushing for the sort of relative autonomy of the South. In 1982, a peace deal gets signed, and in terms of this peace deal, there was some sort of independence recognized for South Sudan. Sorry, in 1972. They have 10 years of peace from 72 to 82. From 82 a very interesting thing begins to build from the universities. I forgot this Arab intellectual, the name of the Arab intellectual, who then begins to drive this agenda of radical Islam and inspires politicians from university campuses from the late 70s. And by 1982, this guy has gained prominence, and it results in a breaking point as far as North-South relations are concerned, because this guy drives a very strong Arabization agenda and trying to, declaring in fact Sudan as an Arab state, which attempted to craft, that agenda. That begins the war that lasts until 2005. And the Anyanya 2 struggle gets started. So the first one was led by Joseph Lagu. The second one, why is his name escaping me? He died in 2005 on a helicopter crash. The name's gonna come. I'm forgetting the politician. I had not just gone over the historical part. John Garang. Yes, so John Garang leads that struggle, and there's a settlement in 2005. Peace, which goes until 2011. In that period, a politician that's played a very crucial role from 2011, Dr. Riek Machar, at some point during that struggle for liberation and that war, there was a break between him and John Garang, I think from 1992, where another faction of the SPLA, the SPLA sort of broke, and Dr. Riek Machar was sort of assuming leadership of it, but there was unity again, culminating in the 2005 settlement. Then we understand you have peace until 2011, where South Sudan officially breaks off from the North, following the success of the referendum. And then from 2013 to 2018, again, you've got now a civil war within South Sudan until the revitalized agreement gets signed in that period. Now, the key for me is this period from 2021 till now, in fact, where attempts have been made to try and build the institutions of the state in South Sudan. In the next slide, please. I'm going to skip these parts because I don't want to go over the ancient history, the colonial period, independence, and transition. And I'm going to skip the next slide, my place in the narrative, because I started with that. And then let's go to defining political development. So political development, this idea, and then in the next one, the idea of political development has been a very interesting idea. Francis Fukuyama, in his book, Political Order and Decay, writes this theory of how states developed from band-level groups, from groups that are led by bandits, quite literally, armed men, and then over time culminate into from traditional leadership to band-level organization to the level of the state. Okay, and his argument is that the difference between a highly advanced state and a state that is led by particular bands or particular bandits is that in the latter, who gets what, when, and how, as per Harold Laswell, is a function of kinship and friendship. But once a state develops over time, it becomes impartial, which is an argument that actually concurs with Weber in the sense that where he defines state as a rational legal entity and emphasizing the impersonal and impartial bureaucratic logic governed by law and reason. So you get a sense of a particular progression from organized, erratically organized communities or groups to being highly organized, impersonal and impartial groups when a political system has developed significantly. Then Alexis de Tocqueville studied the US and other democracies and made this point that in the development of a country, it's interesting that social associations, the associations that people belong to, form part of a political socialization of a country, which becomes the basis for building organized political systems. So he argues that point, that his observations traveling in the West was this is a distinct aspect of what makes democracies work, how people get used to the idea of living in organized structures and participating in those structures. And then lastly, so my own sort of synthesizing of these definitions of political development, it's advanced systems of political representation, drawing from associational life to party politics at the level of the state. And then a proliferation of, please underline this because this is my argument about South Sudan, mass-based organizations compared to para or military organizations. And I think that what I'm going to make next about South Sudan, if you can go to the next slide, is going to show us how this idea of a not so developed mass-based civilian political character is what holds back South Sudan in terms of the ability of the state institutions that are being built to consolidate and to become sustainable and to become trustworthy. And I'll come back to that by making comparisons with the African National Congress. Anyway, we know that in terms of the broad, meta-narratives in political science, we have written about modernization theory when we are reflecting on how scholars have been interacting with the development of states in the global south, that modernization theory has sort of imposed this idea. In fact, even as I was going over what Fukuyama was saying, you would see elements of modernization theory. The idea that states need to move and modernize and build particular institutions which can mirror Western institutions. And therefore, when interventions get made by foreign consultants, among others, they come with a view to modernize the political system, to catch up with the rest of the West and other places. Dependency theory came up with this idea that, in fact, part of what makes things difficult for Africa is the dependency on the international system, which actually, both economically and politically, wasn't really designed to serve the interests of Africans, talking about sovereignty. And then institutionalism, the idea that looks at the development of particular institutions and rules in a particular polity, and then arguing a case for coming up with other institutions with the tension between inclusive and extractive institutions, Acemoglu and Robinson in their book, Why Nations Fail. And I put a question mark on an African approach, because this idea of sequencing that I talk about in this, as an approach, sequencing political development and state building, is a question I'm asking about to what extent could you induce a polity to develop and achieve particular political outcomes, such as, for example, in post-conflict building. One of the things that are required in order to get a country to have a conducive environment for democracy to thrive is demobilization of militaries that were involved in the civil war. Okay, so to what extent could external consultants and external agencies stimulate, or even local players, in fact, stimulate those things as part of sequencing the development of a political development? In the next slide, please, there's a colleague in South Africa that wrote about, I say about South Sudan, the problem is that it's interesting, political systems don't develop in a vacuum. And the path dependency, I think it's Hajun Sheng, who in development, as a development economist, who emphasizes the path dependency of particular outcomes, which when we look at, we say, wow, you've got developmental states there, wow, you have democracy there. His emphasis is that that is not an ahistorical process. In order for political systems to achieve certain levels, they depend on a particular path, which sometimes starts from conflict through. So my argument here, when I mention about the fact that the Sudan has had longer periods of war than peace, since independence, there's only been 20 years of peace. The rest of the 30 or so were conflict. Now, since that is the case, the nature of political institutions and political attitudes that would develop in that environment are military. Now, from a comparative perspective, Mcebisi Ndletyana in South Africa writes that the African National Congress, in order for them to succeed, they built their post-apartheid organization on the foundations of the mass democratic movement, the United Democratic Front, which mass democratic movement had gotten the people of South Africa used to the idea of civilian political participation because it was mass mobilization. So the ANC does not come as a military organization and wish to transform itself in what otherwise is a culture that is prone to military political interaction. So it builds on the infrastructure of a mass-based civilian organization rather than of Mkhonto weSizwe and POC. However, in South Sudan, it's the SPLA, SPLM, between the political and the military always had preeminence. Why? Because we were in a war. And so because of that, but in the ANC, even while in exile, the African National Congress, the political always had preeminence over the military. Bokrisani and other generals who were popular, their popularity didn't exclusively arise out of their military exploits. It was the political ideas and in fact the separation of the civilian headquarters of the ANC, that is the political, in fact, let me say the political headquarters of the ANC in London where OR Tambo was, with the headquarters of where the military, most of the military bases were, always created a hierarchy in the psyche of the political actors in the ANC that the political had preeminence over the military. In fact, the very genesis of the military struggle, the guerrilla warfare in the ANC, was framed as subservient to the greater ideal of liberation. And so it develops right from the onset as subservient. But when you look at the genesis of the liberation struggle in South Sudan, automatically right from the onset it's a civil war and political environment. So anyway, the point I'm landing on in the next slide is that this character, this fashion in which political development has taken place in South Sudan places in a permanent risk the transition to a peaceful and sustainable democracy in South Sudan. And I make this point that the difficulty to transition to civilian systems of political representation is one of the big issues there. So, for example, the processes to set this in motion were the peace agreements, I think the one in 2013 or 2016, and then the 2018 revitalized agreement. Now, both of those were military stalemate settlements, which set in motion a process of a more civilian approach to doing politics there. But every time the generals perceived that they were going to lose gains in the civilian political platforms, they quickly evoke their military might. And in fact, part of the problem why it was difficult to demobilize there was because the power base that the political elites have in South Sudan derived more from their ranks as generals of the SPLM and the IG in government, SPLM in government, and the SPLO in opposition, than it did from charismatic politicians that are loved by the people. But also, when you look at a subnational level, the development of politics at a subnational level is also concerning, because you still have what Sir Wright Mills says are men with guns who still influence a lot of domestic political life. And something in Nigeria, the Fulani and the tensions between the herding communities and those that are farming, and the property issues that has. Anyway, I'm landing on that. That one, there's risks. There's risk to free and fair elections, because also once people perceive that they are going to lose, the option of picking up arms still remains. Also, risks to nation building. 5 minutes more. Risk to nation building. The limited role of political parties. That these two main ones, SPLM in government and SPLM in opposition, are the main parties, and the smaller ones that have been gaining some momentum are still not big national level organizations, even though I think for me the exciting thing about them is that they are being built by people who are not necessarily wanting to drive military might as a political engagement method. But I argue that there is an opportunity in federalism with multiple sides of power at once, but fraught with tensions. Because the southern politicians were never truly about, yes, independence of the South and the politics of Arab North and Christians, Muslim North and Christian South, were always playing a thing. But over and above this facade of what the true schisms are, the true issue was politicians feeling they have control over a particular territory. And I compare this with a study that I did for my PhD of the construction mafia in South Africa. That the development of territories, the breaking away of the construction mafia from a citywide grouping to groupings that were interested in leading specific wards or specific communities happened as a result of citywide elites that wanted to have a structure, a constituency, which they themselves could lead, compared to the citywide forum where these elites were just but one of many and didn't have significant voice. And I saw that, wow, it seems to me that representatives, in fact, have got this thing of wanting to augment their power by claiming a territory where they have exclusive advantage over, so that they can become. So federalism, in my view, in South Sudan has been subservient to elite interest to have a constituency away from Juba, which they can control and be able to actually have their own will and imperatives prevail over the national processes, where they felt that those competing at a national level were too strong to challenge. But notwithstanding that cynicism, it still does present the country with ability to build, because once you federalize, you create many sites of power, and as a result of that, you could open up, you could localize what otherwise is seeming to be a national capital city and oil producing regions problem. Yeah, anyway, so the point I'm making in this is that there is a need to focus on not just the agreements and the forming up of state institutions in a modernization theoretic sense, but to be aware of the need for the people of South Sudan to go over processes of defining political representation in the different states in which they find themselves, in the different payams in which they find themselves, so that they can be able to compete in those areas, even as you try to set up a national political system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we've heard him, South Sudan. But, okay, let me give you opportunity if you have any questions so that you can answer it. But before the questions come, you started by raising the issue of the role of Islam. Is it still playing a critical role today?
Oh, sure, thank you.
So note that, okay, if you want to answer that first, then we can continue.
Okay. So, how the people of Sudan in general resolved the issue of Islam, of Arabization in general, ne?
More and more people are doing research on state formation and state building in Africa, because this is a subject of interest, for me. In the last 5 years, I've been conducting some research on state formation and state building in Africa and the implication for governance. So I'm really happy to see that more and more people, especially emerging scholars, are getting into this subject. So we'll be happy to talk to you after this on what is possible, in this regard. So what I think is really missing from the argument, in order not to waste time, because I think that we're already behind, is the social contract, okay? Because we can talk about all these, and I agree with them, this whole point of, for example, not taking the military aspect of state building into consideration, associational life, and even the points about collapsing all the structures and allowing them to rebuild simultaneously, which is problematic, even though it has its advantages in some instances, especially in the South African context where you wanted to transform. But like you said, there are advantages to some of these things. The bottom line is that my theory is that there was what we call perverse state formation in Africa, which has led to perverse governance systems. And that's what I'll be talking about later in my presentation. The fact that the states as we have them in Africa were never intended to be developmental. They were created to be parasitic and exploitation machines. And we simply inherited these state structures without interrogating why they were created in the first place. And the bottom line of all of this is the fact that Africans were not part of the state making. And so most states in the continent do not have social contracts between government and people. Because once you have a social contract, then these ethnic divisions, these racial divisions, these associational versus modern structures, like PPAK says in his theory of two publics, they will disappear, seeing the state as an opportunity to arrive and for self-enrichment. Those corruptive notions will disappear once people come together and agree that we want to have a state for ourselves, that we will call our own. We have a stake in it, and therefore the next question will be, what kind of political system, what kind of political structures are we going to form in order to reach our goal as a nation that we have formed? The problem is when you impose a territorial and exogenous state from outside, in its concept and purpose, then it misses the associational life that you are talking about. And again, too, fragmentation is not the solution. Why? Because the timeline of the wars in South Sudan has shown that you fragment from Sudan into South Sudan. Within South Sudan, there is still a war ongoing. Within the north, the original Sudan itself, which is now the north, there is still war ongoing there. So it tells you that fragmenting is not the solution. Further dividing and subdividing is not the solution, right? The real solution is in people coming together to say, do we want to coexist as one? It's like marriage. And many people will say, well, marriages were imposed on our forefathers, and these marriages lasted longer than the ones that we're consenting to that end in divorce in 5 years, right? They can make that argument, but the principle here is that if you put two people that don't know each other and make them, sleep on one bed, chances of conflict and intolerance is going to lead to, dissolution at some point, right? Because they don't know each other. But if people come together and say, okay, I know your limitations, you know mine, I know your interests, you know mine, where do they meet? And we agree that in spite of these differences, we want our interests to meet here. And for the sake of that interest, we'll forget our differences, we'll forget the insults we have given to each other, and just move forward with that. Once people get to that level, then they can find out solutions to solve these problems. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that the social contract is important. And I'm happy you talked about people. You call it people, that they didn't factor on people. Because even your critique of Fukuyama, I only agree with Fukuyama because his Weberian notion of states, okay, aligns with what existed in Africa before colonialism. Okay? The whole idea of associational life, the whole idea of institutions, impersonalization, all of those things existed in Africa. And that's why I'm saying I'm happy, because we need to go into research on how states in Africa were organized, how politics was organized, for us to understand that we do have a political identity, a political understanding of what the state is supposed to be, the impersonalization, the need to make the state developmental. All of those things were there in Africa before the colonialists came and introduced their notion of the modern state, which in their instance was developmental. In our case was just law and order machine to enable exploitation to take place. So I'm not really asking a question, because I had a question for you when you started talking about those theoretical frameworks. But then I saw that you brought the African approach and you're asking a question. And the African approach should simply be that there is need for us to have a social contract in Africa where citizens can come together, and all these differences, all those aspects of associational life, for example, of cultures, of religion, will be brought into the play and argued out, negotiated, compromises made, and then what we come out with at the end of the day will be something that people can truly say is theirs. So it's not a question, it's just a comment.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I wasn't here when you started, so I've not even listened much. But from what Chris, was talking about, I tried to pick one or two pieces from there, and that is the issue of social contract. And in that sense, he was talking about citizens coming together and defining their future and their terms and conditions of, togetherness. There's a problem with this issue of social contract and in a multi-ethnic or plural societies, having some consensus to address those differences that, if addressed, can give them a kind of strength. I want to give instance of my country, Nigeria, with over 250 ethnic nationalities, and the way a Nigerian state, came into being, how it was created, and channeled, created to fail, not created to succeed, by, looking at our language differences, our religious differences, and centers of allegiance, cultural differences too. The way our country is at the moment is such that all efforts to, establish this kind of contract by coming together has been aborted. Because if that is done, it will not be in interest of particular section of the country. And unfortunately, that section of the country are in majority in terms of, official numbers. I call it official number because there has been no accurate census. All of them the populations are apportioned. This state, you are this, that one you are that, the other one you are that. Then they project that in the next 10 years, you are going to be from here to here. There's no accurate statistics and accurate data of the segregated structure, of the state. So, and that is why we're equally having problems today. Because if that kind of social contract can be, properly established with the signature of all the nationalities, I think a multi-ethnic or plural societies can leverage on the strength of their differences to become a very strong nation where, obedience to nationhood will supersede primary loyalties. So it's very difficult to do when it is not tailored towards the interests of particular section of the country. Thank you.
Professor, thank you very much for your contribution, especially from the Nigerian perspective. Please, anyone else? We are running behind time, so. Yes, and we have only 8 minutes more. Anybody want to make a contribution?
If there is none,
Yes.
just to kind of give a response to him, only because there is none. I understand the point you are making about the different interest groups, and in the Nigerian case, if we want to talk about the Nigerian case specifically, it cannot be any more difficult than the South African case, for example, that was coming from a very brutal apartheid past that dehumanized, black South Africans, right? But South Africa was able to have what they call the CODESA. That CODESA is an example of a coming together, a negotiation of a social contract that led to the Constitution, which I know many people are criticizing today because of its failures to deliver, on the infrastructure, what Zongolan Talaja calls the infrastructure of democracy. In Nigeria, it's called democracy dividends, food on the table for people, right? Yes, it's been questioned, but the rest of the world hails it as the most liberal constitution, the most progressive constitution in the world. The point I'm making is that there was a negotiation, there was some discussion. Nigeria has had 2 political conferences to discuss the nature of the political system he should have. One in 2007, the one by Obasanjo, and then the other one was by Jonathan in 2014, I think, right? In 2015, when Buhari was contesting for president, he had an unusual political capital. He was feared and respected at the same time by all these ethnic elements you are talking about, all these religious elements, all converge and say we support, you to become president. At that time, if Buhari had said, okay, I want to bring these 2 conferences together, I want to appoint a 12-man committee or whatever, a panel of elders to come together and get into a room and harmonize the 2 outcomes of the 2 conferences. Because one of the things they had said also was in the conference, those 2 conferences, the commonalities were, 1, federalism, true federalism. Because Nigeria is not a true federalism, just a pretension towards federalism. There's too much centralization of power in Abuja. Say again? Military federalism. Well, it's centralization. You guys in Nigeria are now coining a new, and that's good, military federalism. But the point is, if you have said, we want to decentralize power, let's power go back to the state, and whatever that means, and we want to have a rotational presidency, which is something that was also put in that, because again, in Nigeria, like you said, the ethnic groups. So if there are 6 geopolitical zones, and you say, okay, everybody needs to be represented, the question of citizenship inequality is paramount. Some Nigerians are more Nigerians than others. Okay, that's the point I was trying to make. And from Nigerians have it in their, growing up from when you are born to when you die, you know that you can never be president of Nigeria. That the presidency of Nigeria is ceded to a particular ethnic group, with a particular religion. Those are notions of inequality that not just you don't have in your head, you live through them every day. So how do you solve that kind of problem? By ensuring that there is rotational presidency among the zones, that everybody feels that as a citizen, whether you're from this north or south, east or west, Christian or Muslim or African religionist, you have a fair shot at being president of your country. And that's the essence of that social contract. If Buhari had come together and say, I'm putting you in a room, Nigeria cannot disintegrate, go and harmonize and give me a report that will implement, he would have gotten away with it. Nobody would have resisted him as such because of the kind of political power, capital, not power, capital, because there's a difference, that he had then. But he mismanaged it because he came to represent an ethnic and a religious agenda, and then he failed it. And now the president who is there is doing the same thing in his own way, favoring only one section of the country. So you're going round and round and round and round without addressing that social contract question. So how do you resolve this kind of thing? If you go for a constitutional conference today, tendencies that the country will break. All right? So you need a bit of authoritarianism. You need a bit of the benevolent dictator, like we had in Chile, that will come out and try to impose some of these things. Not the military, through the military, but someone that will have that political capital to go to do this and get away with it, so long as people can see. So those are just thoughts, but I will talk about them again in my presentation.
But, no, it's 3 minutes. Okay. But Mr. President, one thing that I also want to say is that the Political Science Association can be teasing these ideas if we look at it from a very objective point of view, so that they can churn it out. Because you are a political scientist and you are coming with your ideas and all that. Because President Ashurale said, to be born in a country and feel that I am not part of this, it can be very demonizing. Because you know that, like in the US, you are born, like USA, that they are not ready for a woman president. As in Ghana, there are some ethnic groups that can also become a president. That is there. But at least you have a fair share that, oh, I can be a minister, I can be this, I can be that, and I can be that. Anyway, but do you want to add anything to it? Because all has been just suggestions, but you have only a minute.
Okay. No, thank you, colleagues, for the feedback. The idea of the bad intentions for state formation in Africa, very clear. The state was built for extraction. In South Africa, it was built to administer mass supply of cheap labor and redesign to design a mode of production premised on supplying first agriculture, then gold, then industrial capital with cheap labor. That was the basis upon which the state was formed. But then thank you for reminding me of Peter Eke's work on primordial versus the civic public. And then let me part on this. For us as political science scholars, we're going to need a lot of epistemic and professional humility. So I went through this process after I had finished my PhD using grounded theory as a method. What I like about grounded theory is the recognition of all its data and the idea of coming to a phenomenon with an open mind, not saying this is what I've come to find. So going through this research process with no predetermined thing that this is what I wanted to find, even though the idea of you are studying how best to federalize, it was clear. I said to the guys, let me speak to people and code that data. I will determine what the research, what the actual structure of the research is about. You know, I didn't go there to compare with the ANC and South Africa. South Sudan's data said to me, this is a case that needs to be compared with South Africa. The data itself told me that. I didn't go to do that. Now, a parting shot. In South Africa, I've done this work around oil and gas public participation, where the entire coastal communities on the eastern part of the country had to be engaged with a view to determining, do they want oil and gas exploration or they don't? I thought I knew South Africa. I thought you could describe our system based on what has been codified in terms of what manner of political system we have. In the whole area of the people, Amambondo, 3 major cities, I was surprised who really is in power for what differed in the political system of South Africa, local government system. And seeing that, I had first seen that in South Sudan, that as African political scientists, let's have the humility to go to undeveloped, in inverted commas, political systems and say, how are you resolving conflicts here? And what does the manner in which you are resolving conflicts and property relations here tell us about what national level system to be designed or state level system? Thank you
very much. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are very grateful for your audience. Please, can you give a clap? So, we have to move to the next session. Do you have Professor Maria Boka here? Good. Professor, please kindly come and take the seat. It's your turn.
Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. Je suis Marie Boka de l'Université Félix Houphouët-Boigny d'Abidjan en Côte d'Ivoire. Alors, j'ai l'honneur de représenter the French-speaking people here because I think that everyone is Anglophone, right? Is there any person that speaks French in this room? Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui parle français dans cette salle?
Je parle français.
Ah! ce panel? D'accord, c'est quel nom? Vous allez interpréter, d'accord, ok. Voilà. Vous êtes... Alors, je vais faire la tête pour voir.
So none of them is here, but she's presenting. So she's chairing. Yeah, she can present. Yeah. So let her just present. If she's the only one, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm the only one from this panel.
Yes, and you are the chair. So
Oh.
chair yourself. Chair yourself. Time yourself and present. But you have 30 minutes till when we go on break on 10 by 10:30.
Okay, thank you so much. Where is my bag? I came with the...
Your bag?
Yes.
It's right here, right? Isn't it?
Oh, okay, thank you. Donc, on va... I will chair myself. Je vais parler aujourd'hui de projets monétaires. Je vais parler de l'éco, du franc CFA et des rivalités sous-régionales que cela peut entraîner. Alors, je suis contente de voir qu'il y a des Nigérians dans cette salle parce qu'on va parler un peu du Nigeria. Je serais ravie d'avoir votre avis sur la question des projets monétaires dans la zone CEDEAO.
So we are going.
Il faut voir ici. Il faut le remonter.
So we are going to talk about currency today, about currency projects and having a common currency in the ECOWAS environment. And it is really interesting, and we are really happy to see that we have Nigerians here because we are going to talk about Nigerians project on currency, building a new currency as well.
Alors, je vais juste dire rapidement ce que c'est que l'éco et le franc CFA avant qu'on rentre dans le vif du sujet.
So we are just going to talk about the difference between ECO and franc CFA before going deeply in the subject.
Alors, l'éco, c'est le projet de monnaie commune à l'ensemble des pays membres de la CEDEAO.
So ECO is the common project that we have today with all the members of ECOWAS.
Alors, ce projet est évoqué depuis plusieurs décennies. Il a été initié depuis 1983 à Conakry, même si c'est seulement en 2019 à la conférence de la CEDEAO à Abuja que le nom d'ECO pour cette monnaie commune a été adopté.
So, ECO is the common money, that currency that has been introduced since 1983, but only has been officially announced in 2017. and unfortunately was stopped by COVID-19. And
Excuse me. Oui?
Yes, I have an opinion. I think it should be the other way around. This is majorly an English-speaking audience, all right? And so you can speak English. I'm very convinced. You speak English too. So you should address the English-speaking audience in English language. The interpretation will be done with French. So that you
Vous êtes très confiant dans dans mes capacités.
Sorry?
Speak English.
Oh, really? Is that
That
correct?
one is a translator.
No, she speaks English, but the thing is, hold on, she may not be confident in doing her presentation in English fully because she's not a fluent speaker of English. Is that correct?
Exactly.
So she prefers to do it in French because remember, this is also part of the coloniality. We should be speaking in languages that we're proficient in so that we can express ourselves fully to the way we want. But there is a problem of speaking to an English audience. So speak, be comfortable. I think she's doing a good job of
Yes.
translation.
Et puis c'est une conférence panafricaine, il faut aussi accepter d'autres langues. Il faut accepter d'entendre le français un peu de temps en temps. Vous êtes dans un pays qui parle français.
so you are in a French-speaking country, which means that you should just try.
You should be comfortable hearing French, right?
Okay, now you are changing my mind. I am now convinced that you can speak English because your use of words there show me that you are competent in being able to, but you are doing this ideologically.
No.
In Dakar, we must speak French. You see,
It was c'était une plaisanterie.
We cannot learn French today. I want to learn it from tomorrow. But today, if you can speak English, then it makes it easier. We all save time actually. If you can just summarize your ideas to us.
Okay.
And I think you can. Let's do that so that we can respond to you. Because she's only interpreting. She doesn't know your presentation, right? So she will not be able to really effectively communicate what you are saying. So may I respectfully ask you that you consider the fact that all of us in the room are English speakers, and then as a result, try and speak to us, because this presentation is for us. It's for us to hear the way you can, and then we'll give you feedback, because I know that you can hear me, and I know that you understand me. Can you do that for us, please?
Well, I just want to say that it was not ideological.
Okay.
Yes. So
It was national. You were trying
no,
to be
it's
loyal
not.
to your
It's not
country.
even national.
Okay.
Okay.
What is
So
it?
I work in a francophone sphere. I speak in French every day. I'm doing an effort here to try and speak your language. So what I was saying to this gentleman, it was only a joke. Okay, c'était une plaisanterie. It was never meant to attack anyone.
No, we don't take offense.
Okay.
We don't take offense at all. In
Okay.
fact, we're impressed by the fact that you can speak English.
Oh, thank you.
So we ask of you to please speak to us in English so that we can understand you.
So, if you're asking me, I can do the effort, but I'm really not that confident that I will translate my ideas the way it should be.
So
Okay.
what we do is that you speak to us. When you find difficulty, you speak in French and
Okay.
she can interpret only those portions.
Okay, this is a really good idea. That's what you are going to do. So, so we already said what was ECO. So, and ECO is also ECO is a monetary project that should unify the member states in the CDAO, ECOWAS region. And since 1983, it was announced, and since then, it always had been reporté à plus tard, repoussé.
So the project has always been delayed since 1983.
And now it is now announced for 2027. So we are not there yet. What I was going to also say is that in the ECOWAS region, we do have two monetary zones. The first one is UEMOA, Union économique et monétaire ouest-africaine. the West African Union, Economic and Monetary Union. There is 8 countries in there: the Benin, Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinée-Bissau, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. In this region, we use the franc CFA, the CFA franc. And the CFA franc comes from colonization. It was first the franc for the French Occidental, the French West Africa. And it was after the independence that it has its new name, but it's the same acronym. It's still CFA, but this time it means African Financial Community. There is also another CFA franc in Central Africa. The meaning is different. It's the Financial Cooperation in Central Africa. So it's the same name, but it's not the same signification, and the exchange rate is still the same. I want to add that the composition of this monetary zone changed with time. Some countries left, like Guinea in 1960, Mali in 1962, Mauritania in 1973. But some came back, like Mali in 1984. All other countries that are not that were not colonized by France asked to enter, like Bissau Guinea in 1999. That's the problem. The problem with the franc CFA and what is contested by the population and most and intellectual elites in our region is that franc, that currency comes from colonization. And if we want to be really independent, we need to change that currency. That's also a part of the discourse that leads the people, the country in the UEMOA zone to try and have another money, because the population really did not want the franc CFA anymore. So they came to the projects of the ECOWAS as a way to save, well, I will say their power, even if it's their autonomy. Exactly, thank you. And that sentiment in our region, we call it the sentiment anti-français, the anti-French sentiment. But it's not an anti-French sentiment. It's anti the political establishment, not exactly political sentiment, but the way the France leads its politics in our region, because our ties are still very strong. You do not have that in the Anglophone country. Your tie with Great Britain is almost not existent. You have more tie with the US, from what I understand, or the UK even. Yes. We have also another zone, the ZMAO, where there is the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Nigeria, and even Sierra Leone. And the Cape Verde is another, the Cape Verde is not a member of any union in any way. So when you have those types of different backgrounds between members in the same organization, there's also there's conflict. Conflict is necessarily going to arise. So what are we going to say, so we can go very quickly? I'm going to say that there is 2 types of rivalry because of this money, this currency. And this rivalry evolves from the colonial past and the way we handled our colonial heritage in different regions. First of all, there is a rivalry between Anglophone and Francophone. Because, first of all, the Anglophone Africa is much more developed than the Francophone world. Okay. We can see that South Africa and Nigeria are the leader of our continent. They are not French-speaking countries. They do not have a past with France or colonization by France. And exactly when we study the literature, is that fact is also put forward as a way to explain why you are more developed. I'm not saying that it's true. I do not fully share that sentiment. But what we can say, and I think that there is truth in it, is that when we were colonized by the English, you were very quickly part of the liberal world, or the liberalization and capitalism. That's not exactly the way French introduced Francophone Africa in the economic international system. They also say that the way the indirect rule in people that were colonized by the UK means that you have much more autonomy in your life and the way you govern yourself. And it's true that when the French came, because of universalism, they imposed their culture. They imposed their way of life, their way of thinking, and their language. They tried to erase the local language. And the literature say that actually the fact that you try, or that you get to keep, the way that you get to keep your local heritage is actually the fact that you build on that, and your development build on that. That's the literature that I read. But we are going to discuss that, because I know that some people are not really, do not really agree with that. But what I think is also important is that in development, the historical heritage is important, but we need to consider facts. Okay, and the fact is that for a country to be developed, you need a vast superficie, a vast population. You also need political stability. And when you look at the francophone country in that region, you know that they are not that vast. The countries that are vast, Mali, for example, the Mali is not an example of political stability. The second type of rivalry is the French-speaking zone itself. If you remember, or if you follow the news, you know that since 2023, there is what we call the AAPS, the Alliance of the States in the Sahel, formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And it comes to being because of the ECOWAS reaction to the coup in Niger and to save President Bazoum. So the sovereignist movement or populism in these countries are also devising the UEMOA zone, because those countries really want to get out, or they say that they want to get out, because they are trying to instrumentalize this disagreement to conserve their power. The people in power, the military general, they want to conserve their power, and they draw on that discussion of France CFA and colonial heritage to mobilize the mass and get them to accept their rules. So I'm going to stop here, but I just want to say that Russia and China draws on that and try to impose their influence, because the France control of this region is slipping and they want to get into that. So I'm going to stop here because I talk way too much, and thank you for listening to me, and thank you for your observation that I know are coming.
Okay, thank you very much. Because now I thank you for really, just stopping because we need to leave in the next 5 minutes. So I will help you to just try and see if there are questions, so that you don't have to have that responsibility. Any questions for her? Comments?
Comments. Yeah, thank you. You have managed to wriggle out of the entanglement. Having a common currency is applaudable because of the inherent benefits and how it smoothens trade across the borders. Because we can experience when we arrive in Senegal, changing from CFA to, I don't know whether to change to Naira or to dollar, and it was better for me to keep my money instead of losing it because I don't understand, the chemistry of the whole process. Looking at the presentation and the challenges of having a, common currency, how do we reconcile the emergent existence of Sahel states and the current touted proposal of having global African common currency and that of ECO? I think the ECO falls within the parentheses of ECOWAS, am I correct? Now, there's advocacy now for African currency, and with the divisions and the military coup and the sense of national pride, how do we really come out of it? Because I believe that the essence of one of the problems we have in many political science circles, even at national level, is we stop whatever we do at the level of conclusion, summary conclusion. We don't place. I attended Strategic Institute. At the end of every presentation, we usually have recommendations and implementation strategies. Can AAPS get to the point of having policy briefs for African governments with implementation strategies? It does not end at recommending you do this, you do that, this is supposed to be done. How do they do it? How do we make it to work out? Because the average policymaker does not have that time to read volumes and read your literature review and your methodology and all those ones. He looks at your summary, your conclusion, implementation strategies. He will not minute it out to the permanent secretary to continue from there. All these ones will be trashed. So how do we come out of issue of national pride, issue of reconciling the breakaway states, and the issue of reconciling the ECO with African, currency? I don't know what you can make out of that.
Okay, we don't have time now. We have only 3 minutes. So just a question. I don't know theoretical framework, no background of study.
Just a question. Okay, mine is a direct question. How has the close economic ties among the Francophone countries helped in developing these countries, even if we can establish that the relationship the Anglophone countries with the West has not really helped, instead it has helped to underdevelop these countries. Is there anything the Anglophone countries can learn from the economic close ties among the Francophone countries? Thank you.
Thank you. Quick one for me. What lessons have you drawn from European financial integration, especially looking at Brexit, but also the development of an attitude towards Brussels from ordinary citizens in Europe? That is some growing resentment. Especially, financial integration imposes the development of supranational bodies, such as the ECB, for example, the European Central Bank, and there's, which creates another avenue for imposition of regional-wide macroeconomic policy, if you like, and how that tends to pity the supranational institution against the domestic states. And talking sovereignty, by the way, the growing resentment against the influence of ECB on the sovereignty of the individual states in Europe. Thank you.
Our time is up here.
It's okay. I am very worried about the issues about common currency. Now, the basic function of currency is the relevance is at exchange. Now, considering the fact that productivity is low, industrialization is low, and this sadly look like the fundamental nature of most states. How possible would it be to have and manage common currency within the international economic system that is skewed to the disadvantage of these states in Africa and in West Africa particularly, vis-a-vis the low production, low export? The whole of Africa contribute less than 10% in international trade. And the value of currency is tied strictly to the productive capacity of nations. So of what value and how sustainable will it be when we are not producing sufficiently? I think it's important to address. Thank you, sir.
So let's do it this way. I don't think you need to answer all these questions. You should take them as feedback for your research on how to, especially this last question is really critical. It's ongoing. So you can incorporate them. You don't need to answer because you are not on the hot seat here. So just take it like that so that we can close now. The one point I want to just make is just a note on the contradiction of using French assimilation policy to oppose and also unite, right? The politicians use it to oppose by using it to unite the people against the French system. So that's really curious. But I note what you said about the Anglophone, that we have disengagement and kind of freedom, if you like, from Britain, and that has enabled us to develop, better. But I'm also wondering how much we have used that freedom to really advance ourselves. For me, the relative difference would be the fact that the French, and this is not different, the French just kept a tighter hold on the the Francophone more than the British did. Otherwise, the principle of making states to be instrumentalists to enable exploitation rather than development the principle is the same across Africa, whether it's Francophone or Anglophone or Lusophone. But the French one have held on more tightly and subordinated the entire process of development to France, to just France. So maybe that factor, the disingenuity, the dishonesty, and the holding on to exploitation was more blatant with you guys and subordinated. And maybe one of the things that actually allowed that to happen for so long is the assimilation policy that made you believe that you are going to become French citizens, whereas you were not. So that's something to just think about. You don't need to give a general overview. Yes, thank you.
I just want to add very quickly to what you said about the difference between French and British colonization. It's not that I do not really agree about that, because when you see how the currency was imposed both in Nigeria and in Cote d'Ivoire, people conclude that in fact it's the same international public policy that the two former colonial powers did use. First of all, the local population did not want to use that foreign money. They did have their money. They have gold and they have their quarries that they were using in their day-to-day lives, and they like that. And what those population, the local population did in Cote d'Ivoire is that they opposed those currency, because they actually prefer, in my region, in the east of Cote d'Ivoire, the people actually prefer to use the British currency, because that British currency, when they weighed it, the British currency was plus lourd. It was plus lourd, more heavy. It was heavier. So they like that it was heavier because their local currency works by weight. So they think that if the currency is heavier, is that it has more value. So the French did not like that. So they try to actually cut the access to the British currency, so as a way to impose the French franc, because the population didn't happen to use that franc, and they also restrained their access to the gold and the quarries. So these methods were also used by the British. Okay. So that.
Thank you very much. We'll go for tea break now, and we'll come back in 10 minutes to continue the next panel, so that we just keep to the time going forward. Please.
Let's continue.
Okay, we can see.
No, don't stretch.
Yeah. Because we ate breakfast. Some people don't eat breakfast. Hello. Yeah, so you're from Cote d'Ivoire.
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Professor. So
des territoires.
Testing 1, 2. Okay. Online, good morning, colleagues that are joining us online. We are now busy with session 3 that was scheduled for 10:45 to 12, chaired by Ongama Mtimka. Is there anyone who is supposed to be in this session? Conrad John Mabaso or Eric Andemeye or Chimene in the online? No responses, none of them? Okay. All right, we've got a panel this morning. We are continuing. The title of the panel, there are people online, but not the presenters. Yeah. Okay. 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 The person was supposed to present yesterday. All right, please come, Prof. You guys, okay, all right.
Chairperson will sit here.
Sorry. For the food, yeah. All right, Prof, I forgot your name.
Isaac Osumensa.
Osumensa, yes.
Isaac,
Okay,
Isaac, for short.
all right. It's now 11:04, and we've got another panel number 7, that's going to follow. So I take it it's actually, it was supposed to be an hour 45. Hour 45, hour 15, okay. So we're going to take an hour, you say. All right, we are going to go according to the schedule. First up is Professor Christopher Isike, presenting on Towards Explaining the State and Governance Challenges in Africa's Quest for Development. Let us welcome you. Can some volume on the red mic, please? And Prof. Isike is also the president, let me say the outgoing president of the African Association of Political Studies.
Okay, now you've put me under pressure to perform. Okay, so good morning. It's still morning, yeah? Morning. So the title of my paper, if you look at the program, is Towards Explaining the State and Governance Challenges in Africa, looking at our quest for a developmental state. In other words, in Africa, we have a problem of development, and we have actually, in my view, failed at it, but failed state scholars will tell you that insofar as we have the law and order still being maintained in some of the states, we cannot talk about state failure. So I just see state challenges to avoid controversy. But the question for me is, my core argument is that we have a developmental crisis that is rooted in a deep misunderstanding of the nature, the origin, and purpose of the states as we have them in Africa. So that unlike European states, which came out from social contracts, between citizens and government, states in Africa were externally imposed colonial constructs, all right, that were designed not for development, but for extraction. Okay? In other words, if we understand that the purpose of the state that was created by the colonialists was to extract, was to exploit, and therefore, for you to achieve that extraction and exploitation, you need to also have a governance system that is corrupt. Do you understand? So, for me, the creation of states in Africa were perverse because citizens did not have a say in the creation of these states. That perverse formation of the state has also produced what I call perverse governance systems that continue to shape post-colonial state performance, leading to human insecurity and underdevelopment today. So that's the argument I'm really trying to make. So the question is, why is the state in Africa performing poorly? In the paper, this paper has already been sent, it's been published actually in African Studies Journal in the US. I made a distinction between states in Africa and African states. That we do not have African states. We have states in Africa because these states were imposed on us. We did not create them. So we can't call them African states in the same way you call European states or American states, right? So my argument is that there have been many descriptions that have been used to describe states in Africa, whether some will call it weak states, failed states, predatory states. However you want to look at it, all of this scholarship tend to describe the symptoms of state failure, and they have not really gone into the structural causes of state failure in the continent. So my paper is arguing that the state in Africa was not built on a social contract where you have citizenship consent or popular legitimacy. Okay? And that, like I said before, the purpose of the state was colonial extraction, not development. So therefore, the governance mechanisms were designed from the very beginning to ensure regime control, regime security, and regime exploitation. Okay? So when we talk about the states in Africa, we really mean the security of the regime that is in power, or the political elite, not the people who should make up the state and decide for themselves whether they have a state or not. So now, why is the social contract important? If you draw on the scholarship of people like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Immanuel Kant, and Jürgen Habermas, my paper explains why social contracts are crucial. They are important, one, for state legitimacy. Okay? For a state to be legitimate, the citizens of that state need to buy in, need to recognize and accept that this state is ours. And for them to buy in and therefore give the state legitimacy, they have to participate in the making of the state itself through that social contracting. The second point is that it is also important for constitutional patriotism. Constitutional patriotism was something that was used by a German scholar, Jürgen Habermas, after the collapse of the wall, the Berlin Wall, when Germany came back together as one. He argued that what led to the division was the narrow nature of politics in Germany. That, you know, politics was organized around ideology, was organized around race and ethnicity, regions, and their divisions, right? And he said, if for us to come back as one Germany, we need to organize new values, values that are recognizable and acceptable to the divide, whether you be from the west or from the east. These values are common to you. For example, hard work, human dignity, truth-telling. These are values that he says all Germans can unite around, and that these values should be put in the constitution and then become the basis of a new Germany. And they now became the basis of patriotism towards the constitution and ipso facto towards, you know, the state. And these have implications for nation building and accountability, because when people buy into the state, then they contribute towards the state to build the state, and then also it leads to accountable governance, because everybody agrees that it's important for us to have these values. So in Europe and North America, states were built on collective consent and citizenship, even though citizenship inequality, even though you want to argue that, for instance, in America, the state was formed by a group of elites. But remember that the people pushed back, and then they had what we call the constitutional amendments that now give rise to participation. So the point I'm really trying to make, because I've been told I have only 5 minutes, is that because the colonial state was a mechanism for exploitation, it produced governance patterns that prioritized the survival of over the welfare of citizens. It produced elite accumulation of wealth over public accountability. It also led to coercion over inclusion, right? The use of force. And we listened to the first presentation in the morning where he talked about the military culture. That is where that also comes from. So what I'm saying in essence is that post-independence leaders in Africa inherited and largely maintained this logic by reproducing corruption, reproducing elite predation on the citizens, reproducing weak institutions in order to ensure that there's no accountability for them. Sometimes even deliberately underfunding education so that they can keep themselves in power, weaponizing the poverty of the people to maintain power. So maintaining power for them was more important than delivering on the purpose of the state, which is to, help the citizens. And that naturally leads to exclusionary politics and uneven development. For me, this explains why many states in Africa struggle to provide basic services, and even now to maintain security or deliver on any kind of inclusive government. I do have case studies here. My case studies were Nigeria and South Africa, but I don't have time to except to say that Nigeria, for example, you see that it's failing in its core functions of security, service delivery and infrastructure. There's high corruption, poor human development outcomes, and right? And then also public services, especially education and health, are in crisis, simply because there is no understanding that the government exists for the people to provide certain basic services like public health, like public education, free of charge to the its citizens, and even adopting what we call a social democracy instead of a liberal democracy. And then in South Africa, they're a bit different because they had what we call a negotiated social contract, the CODESA. But even at that, you still see governance failures are worsening, a two-tier public health system, and declining state capability. All of these things predatory statecraft that erodes state legitimacy and undermines development. So even though there are differences between Nigeria and South Africa, the fundamental of a misunderstanding of the purpose of state is illustrated in the governance failures that are causing a lot of development challenges. So let me conclude. I think I have 2 minutes or so. Let me conclude by arguing for rethinking and rebuilding the state in order to make it African. And one, I'm saying that we need to transform our state system in the continent and turn them into developmental states. For that to happen, we need to have new social contracts that are grounded in equality of citizenship and the broad participation of citizens to be included in that discussion is important. Then we need to begin to shift from regime security to human security. We should privilege what I call the social state over the political state. The political state is the regime security, right? While just give me a minute. Yeah, the political state is the security of the regime, security of the elite, whereas social state is prioritizing the security of the citizens, of the people that make up the state. And then institutions should be designed for development, not extraction. So in short, I'm saying that in Africa, our prospects for reinventing, for development depends on reinventing the inherited colonial states, you know, both conceptually, structurally, and practically. That's the argument I'm trying to make. But I'm open to to answering more questions on this argument. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are calling up next. Let's go that way. Okay. We're calling up next.
What is
Mr. Chuma.
What is she talking about?
No,
What
it's
is the
fine.
topic?
It's fine. Let's have her come in.
Because my topic is close to what he's talking about.
Okay.
She's talking about.
No, it's fine. Let's allow to be the prof allowed to be chair to
Yeah.
chair.
Oh, yeah.
C'est bon, monsieur. Ouais. Allez-y, sinon je fais des. Bonjour tout le monde. Ma communication porte sur le thème, l'intitulé suivant, Penser la souveraineté africaine à l'épreuve des politiques publiques énergétiques globalisées, l'approche out-in comme cadre théorique. Le contexte.
So she will be talking about thinking African sovereignty. No. Thinking African sovereignty in the context of challenges on energy policies with an out-in approach as a framework.
Ici, donc, le plan de présentation, contexte problématique, cadre théorique, méthodologie, résultats, présenter les résultats, dégager les conclusions et perspectives. Contexte. Plan de Donc, après, dès les années 1950 et récemment avec la COP21,
Since 1990 and recently with COP21,
la transition énergétique structure
energy transition,
les référentiels du secteur de l'énergie. Et on voit que cette transition énergétique crée des asymétries, puisque l'Afrique subit les conséquences du changement climatique qu'elle n'a pas causé. Et 4%
Africa is mainly feeling the effects of energy transition, while we are not the one who are mainly responsible for it.
Selon le rapport du GIEC, l'Afrique produit 4% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, tandis qu'elle reste dépendante de l'aide publique au développement pour financer les politiques de transition énergétique.
We are still dependent on public aid for us to combat energy transition, while we only participate at a really low rate to creating gas effects.
Et concernant le cas du Sénégal, on voit qu'il y a des réformes allant dans le sens de s'aligner des référentiels de la transition énergétique, notamment avec les réformes.
Regarding Senegal, we have today, we are trying to align with the referential that we have for energy transition.
La loi 98-29, le code de l'électricité qui
With the law 9829 electrification code.
qui acte l'entrée des acteurs internationaux. Donc la libéralisation a été une injonction des acteurs internationaux.
So the court's purpose is to organize the entry of the international stakeholders in the Senegalese framework of electrical energy transition.
Donc dans ce contexte, d'où cette question centrale, comment les États africains exercent leur
How
souveraineté
African states are using their sovereignty
sur les politiques publiques énergétiques,
in public policies and energy public policies,
tout en demeurant dépendants de l'aide publique au développement et
while
des
they are
standards
still
internationaux.
dependent in public aid.
Par rapport au cas théorique, donc l'approche out-in est centrale. Il s'agit d'un travail de déconstruction des modèles d'analyse de l'action publique en partant des approches classiques comme
So
top-down,
the outreach approach is central, and it is inspired from classical models such as the top-down model.
bottom-up,
Bottom-up.
c'est-à-dire la décision vient des acteurs locaux.
And the decisions come from local stakeholders.
Les limites de ces approches, c'est que ces approches privilégient les dynamiques internes.
The limits of these approaches is that they put forward the internal dynamics,
Par contre, l'approche out-in, c'est-à-dire du dehors vers le dedans,
while the approach out in, which means from inside to outside,
met en exergue la primauté des influences externes dans le policy making africain.
privileges the profit of the locals in the making of African policies.
Et il n'y a pas d'opposition entre l'interne et l'externe à l'image de l'approche classique institutionnelle.
And there's no controversy between out-in approach and the constitution.
Donc, et ici, le concept de souveraineté peut être défini non pas comme une dépendance, comme cette opposition en dépendance-autonomie, mais un processus relationnel de négociation produisant une souveraineté située, pragmatique et relationnelle.
Sovereignty here is more, is not necessarily feeding into the opposition between autonomy and dependency.
Et pour répondre à cette question, la méthodologie, c'était une recherche empirique au Sénégal.
Thinking about how we will get there, we have this methodology that was developed,
Qui s'est déroulée de janvier à décembre 2020, complétée en mars 2025.
that was developed between December 2020 to March 2025.
22 entretiens semi-directifs ont été réalisés auprès d'acteurs institutionnels, partenaires technico-financiers, des représentants de la société civile.
Where we were able to conduct 22 interviews with institutional stakeholders and as well as civil society.
Cette approche est complétée par une analyse documentaire, c'est-à-dire l'exploitation des politiques énergétiques, les instruments de régulation, les lettres de politique sectorielle, les rapports internationaux des bailleurs de fonds.
The approach was strengthened by documentary analysis, such as documents related to the regulation of energy transition and
L'exploitation de ces données a abouti aux résultats suivants.
the exploitation of this data has led to the following results.
Nous avons une construction exogène des référentiels,
We have an exogenous construction of the
c'est-à-dire
referentials.
les référentiels nationaux sont extravertis et sont construits au sein des organisations internationales telles que l'Agence internationale de l'énergie, la Banque mondiale et d'autres institutions de l'ONU.
Meaning that local referentials were built around international institutions framework.
Actuellement, les référentiels qui structurent le secteur énergétique, c'est l'initiative énergie durable pour tous et l'ODD 7.
The referential that we currently have around energy right now is built with
SE for
okay,
all.
with the
Énergie durable pour tous.
okay, with sustainable energy for all, and
ODD 7.
and the global objectives number 7.
Et les vecteurs d'implantation de ces référentiels sont les communautés épistémiques. Au Sénégal, nous pouvons citer ENDA Énergie, CERE, etc.
And the institutions that are meant to direct all these referentials are local institutions here in Senegal.
Et l'exemple d'alignement de ces référentiels, on peut prendre l'exemple de l'initiative énergie durable pour tous. Nous avons 3 piliers standardisés. Premier pilier, c'est l'accès universel à l'électricité.
We have 3 pillars with those referentials. The first one being access to universal access to electricity.
Deuxième, efficacité énergétique. 3, énergie renouvelable.
The second one being energy efficacy, and the last one renewable energies.
Et nous avons
Renewable
les
energies.
instruments de la transnationalisation, nous avons les conditionnalités financières.
And with the instruments, we have the financial conditionalities.
Par exemple, l'étude d'impact environnemental est obligatoire pour la validité des projets de développement.
The analysis of environmental assessment is necessary to move into these approaches.
Vous avez également l'injonction, la politique de vérité des prix imposée par la Banque mondiale.
We have the truth of price, which is forced by World Bank today to our community, to our institutions.
Vous avez les indicateurs internationaux tels que RISE, Doing Business, ISO.
We have international indicators such as RISE, Doing Business as well.
L'autre instrument, c'est l'assistance technique.
The other instrument is technical assistance,
qui véhicule des modèles organisationnels conformes au New Public Management.
that is working on models that are conform to the new public management
Et
approach.
vous verrez que cette souveraineté est sous contrainte.
So, which means that the sovereignty we have today is very limited.
Parce que les États sont dans une autonomie limitée dans la fabrique, occupent une place limitée dans la fabrique des politiques ou des référentiels.
Because our states are really limited in taking part of the creation of the policies regarding those subjects.
Et lors des entretiens, un acteur institutionnel, c'est en wolof, ku la abal ay gët fu ko neex lay xool. Ça veut dire que celui qui te prête tes yeux t'oblige à regarder dans la même direction.
And during
Donc, c'est
those
une
interviews,
imposition.
we had some people we have this common saying in Wolof which says literally that somebody who gives you an eye will tell you where you will look at.
Chez moi, on peut représenter l'autonomie limitée dans la fabrique au Sénégal.
And this scheme is just a representative of
Donc,
the limited autonomy.
En conclusion, oui. Donc la souveraineté africaine peut être conçue non pas une rupture face à la globalisation,
African
mais
sovereignty is not a break towards globalization,
mais un processus de négociation continue entre contraintes externes et stratégies internes de légitimation politique économique.
but a process of continuing and internal negotiations between us and as well global institutions.
Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
Thank you. What I'm appreciating so far is that the political science allows us a wide range of topics to tackle. So we had a classical political economy, political philosophy discussion around the state and its construction in Africa. The second one focusing on the political economy and the international political economy of energy production in the continent, and the nuances as far as sovereignty is concerned. I think that also, I like the nuances in the traditional concepts around state versus national security. I like the concepts around sovereignty in relation to dependency versus independent, but also sovereignty when it comes to the sovereignty economically of a country, and the big debates about the energy transition, which Africa has to bear the responsibility of becoming aware of when it wants to rapidly develop its energy resources while constrained by the climate that we're facing. Last but not least, Prof. Isaac Owusu-Mensah.
Thank you very much. Okay. I want him to project my slides for me. About the role of the state, and we are talking about.
We have people online. Maybe
Hello.
One,
Hello.
two, 1, 2.
Yeah, it's back. Okay. Thank you very much. So we are talking about the role of states, and we are talking about how the external factors and other very important elements are strangling, or if you want, interrupting with our developmental objectives. But I have a different perspective I want to bring on board. Today, please can you look at it? The topic is contextualizing Gatton's theory of imperialism in Ghana's District Assembly Common Fund deductions. This is how I want to explain. I'm sure as political scientists, we all know about Gatton's theory of imperialism, but in very brief, Gatton's theory of imperialism explains that there's a center and there's a periphery. The center, West developed countries, while the periphery is the global south. He goes on to explain that the center has a center and periphery, whilst the periphery also has the center and the periphery. In brief, he says that the center in the center are the people who make decisions at the top. So in the US, in all the developed countries, they are at the center. And the periphery of the center are those who are in the working class, those who are the farmers, the plumbers, the transport owners. These are the people we call the periphery of the center. And now when you come to the periphery, which is the developing countries of Africa and the global south, the center is the political elite. And the periphery are the poorer people in the street. So he goes on to say that there's a harmony between the center of the center, which is the decision makers in the US, in the Western countries, and the decision makers in Africa who perpetuate our underdevelopment. And then he goes on to say that the periphery in the south, in the north, or in the west, and the periphery in the south have this harmony of interest. Because anything that you do to project those in the periphery of the south are at the detriment of those in the periphery of the north. Because if you are processing your raw materials here, it means that those in the north are not going to get job to do. So basically, this is what we call Gatton's theory of imperialism. I want to contextualize it to what we call the District Assembly's Common Fund. Please can move on to the next slide. Now, the District Assembly Common Fund in Ghana, when we were going to the third wave, we decided that as a way of contributing to ensure there's a harmonized national development, let us have some fund, 5% of the national resources set aside so that we can use this resource to spread across every district in Ghana, so that every district in Ghana will have some amount of money they can use for their development, for their own local development. And therefore, every part of the country will benefit, apart from what the central government will decide. Every district has some money to spend. What happens? Having agreed that 5% of national resources should be the District Assembly Common Fund to be shared by a defined formula, then it comes to a point that there's some form of deductions. So instead of sending, let's say we got 1 million Ghana cedis, instead of sending 5% to all the assemblies in Ghana to share, those in Accra decided that let's have some deductions. So I contextualize Gatton's theory of imperialism in this context. How does it work? Now, when there's the amount of money to be sent to the district is defined. It's 5% of national revenue. So anytime you take some out of it, you are stifling development at the local level. Now what happens? There's a center and there's a periphery. The center is Accra, whereby the District Assembly Common Fund and then the decision making about the fund are called in the center of the center. And the periphery of the center are the businessmen in Accra who are benefiting from the deductions that are being made. Because if the money goes to the district, they will not have opportunity to do that. Then who are the periphery here? The District Assembly that the money is supposed to go, and this is called the periphery. And then in the periphery, we have the center of the periphery and the periphery of the periphery. The center of the periphery is the district chief executive or the administrators at the district level. And the periphery of the periphery are the people who are going to benefit from the project. Now, how does it link up? How do I link up the two here? As I indicated earlier on, from the Gatton's theory of imperialism, there's harmony between the center of the center and the center of the periphery. In Ghana, the same way, the District Assembly Common Fund administrators have some form of harmony between them and the district chief executive. Because if they take part of their money and they award a contract in Accra through the deductions, those are the district chief executive or the district administrator also benefit. Because they call them to Accra, oh, we gave a contract to this person, we are here to say thank you very much, so this is part of your share. And the periphery of the periphery are the people supposed to get the market, the schools, the clinic, or the ones who are going to suffer. So there's disharmony between the local people and the businessman in Accra, because anytime they make a deduction, it means that the people at the local level are going to suffer. But when they make the deduction and give it to the businessman in Accra, who goes on to supply the unneeded, unwarranted products to the districts, they are those who are going to benefit. No, 5 minutes more. So what I try to say, that I try to look at 10-year period, how these deductions have moved on. Please, can you roll it for me? Just keep rolling. Keep rolling. We want to see the figures. So now, I look at 10-year period from 2011 to 2020, and look at the deduction we made. 33% in 2011, 48% in 2012, 32% in 2013, 28% in 2014, 23%, 19%, 18%, 20%, 22%, and 24.6%. This small money, this percentage we see run into billions, because 5% of GDP is cut out as a money for the district chief executive, the money for this assembly common fund. And what are they used for? They buy tractors to assemblies that they don't need. They buy chemicals to the assemblies they don't need. And what is the motivation here? The motivation is that they are able to make percentages out of the deductions that has been made at the center. So in brief, my time is very limited. In brief, what I went on to say is that in as much as we are interested in ensuring that we take control of our own development, when we are also given the chance, we want to apply the public choice theory, whereby the interest of the individual highly supersedes the interest of the state. Thank you very much. I said I was 3 minutes. Oh, I didn't know. I thought my time was after. I was just rushed. But I think the core argument has been made. Thank you very much.
Wow, you've heard it. An amazing mix of topics here. Political economy, international political economy, and classical debates in political science around the social contract and how we organize states. Decoloniality also. The floor is open. The floor is open, colleagues. Thank you. I'd like you to take notes as the questions are asked, you know. Prof. All the way from the southern tip of Africa.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Program Director. I've got, I don't want to say question, but comments to both Prof. Izike and Prof. Amwa.
Isaac.
Yeah.
Isaac Ousu Mensa.
Oh yeah, Mensa. I know the player Mensa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Prof, Maybe to the two of you, it could be a combined question. When we look at the center and the periphery, and we look at the state, the colonial state, you can see the same in the East. The East share the same experience with us in terms of colonization, in terms of center and periphery. But the development trajectory seems to be different. What explains it? Prof, what explains the rise of China? Because China was colonized. What explains the rise of the Asian tigers? Because we share almost the same history. Of course, China, of course, we know the revolution may put them at a different pedestal in terms of how they take ownership of their development and how they drive it. Prof, same issue. Yes, why is it that these countries have managed to get their own development out of this entanglement? Somebody spoke about entanglement the other day. Yeah. Out of this entanglement, how is it that they are able to advance their own development? Thank you.
Let's take all the questions and then have some answer, some in discussions.
Thank you, Professor Mensah.
Yes, sir.
A nice topic. Yeah. What is the future of state in Ghana? Is Ghana federal or unitary? What is the political chemistry of Ghana? If it is federal, it means there's kind of decentralization of state power down to, the bottom. Do they have local government systems or provinces or whatever? And looking at that, how do you fit in Gatton's theory of center and periphery? And the periphery of the periphery, from my own understanding, may be those Franz Fanon called the hewers of stone and drawers of water, the wretched of the earth. How do they fit into this particular sharing of state resources and allocation of state power? Then Our Lady that delivered on transitional energy, we struggle to understand what you presented, even though transitional energy is not really at the heart of political science research, but there's a policy, anchoring it. What is really transitional energy? Is there any cultural imperative to, transiting energy, either promoting it or being an obstacle? Because the World Bank says in every analysis we are making in this area that culture matters. Environmental culture, the men in people's way of life, the way they live, and the perspective of reality and developmental, models. Is there a way all this enhances, energy transition? And is it cheaper to that person at the receiving end of power? Maybe you're talking about solar energy or wind energy, and today we are having in some parts of Asia vehicles that are not operated by human beings. They go on their own. So when do we get there? Is it through this transitional energy or any other process? Then let me come to that of my brother here, Professor Sike. He made clear the nature of state in Africa, and particularly in Nigeria. When the colonial masters came, they met people who were already enjoying their sovereignty, at that level. The people of the north, dominantly by Hausa and Fulani, in the west, the Yorubas, down the south there. You have on the east, the Igbos, the Ijos, the Ikweres around rivers. And for purpose of economic exploitation, they brought them together and penetrated them through the instrument of religion by calling us a black, continent, those who are living in the wild. Including the religion brought its own education, telling us that Mungo Park, I think, found the river Niger.
Thank you.
And there was nobody living there before, apart from Mungo Park that came, and he found the river Niger. So
Thank you, Prof.
So that's stop at him, because I wanted, let me stop the analysis here.
I'd like them to also have time to respond.
Yes, I want to get to where he made a point on issue of social contract. I think part of the process is supposed to be constitutional, and by doing that, we have elected representatives that represent the generality of others. And once we elect them to come there to represent us, they turn that mandate to serve themselves without serving those that elected them. And we exist on paper that there's a social contract, but it's not working. So that's a kind of problem we have. When you talk, they say, no, go and talk to your representative. And your representative has his own private interest. He wants his money in his pocket, not those that represented him.
Thank you.
Okay, let me stop at this.
Thank you. Any at the back? Thank you. I hope my panel has noted everything, because after all the questions, I'll start from you, Prof, and then Prof, and then wrap up with you, President.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in French. Voilà, je suis pas très bon en...
Wait a little.
Oui. Oui, je remercie déjà les participants pour voilà, leur présentation.
Thank you to the speakers for their presentation.
Ouais, qui est assez court peut-être, mais qui est très riche, voilà, et qui est prometteur dans une logique de recherche.
Which is short, but still really rich and of high quality.
D'accord. Donc, en fait, je voulais intervenir pour dire que, en fait, ce sont des choses qui traversent, ce sont des idées, des référentiels qui traversent vraiment toute l'Afrique.
It's the same ideas that we have around the whole Africa.
Oui. En fait, lorsque j'ai vu accès à l'électricité universelle, ça me fait penser à une chose, à la santé pour tous.
When I saw access to energy, it just brought me to public health.
Oui. En fait, je travaille sur la santé, donc en fait, ce sont les mêmes mots que je vois tout le temps dans les mêmes programmes.
It is the same challenges that we face in all the different sectors.
Oui. En fait, j'ai réalisé une étude pour voir les mots qui revenaient dans les programmes internationaux et les programmes nationaux.
I realized a study just to see the difference between the challenges that we have at the international level and at the local level, and it's always the same challenges and the same words that we find.
Oui, dans les programmes nationaux, lorsque tu vois par exemple un mot comme résilience, comme soutenabilité, comme appropriation, je les vois aussi au niveau national, aussi au niveau local.
Internationally, you find terms such as resilience and inclusion and all of that, and it's the same terms as well that we have here, the same challenges for us as well locally.
D'accord, donc ma question est la suivante, et quoi faire de façon concrète, vraiment concrètement, pour se détacher de ces buzzwords, parce que on a l'impression que...
We should detach from these words that are more like trends than actual reality.
Voilà. Comment faire en fait pour se départir de tout ça? Merci.
So how do we detach from these words?
Voilà, de façon concrète, oui.
Thank you. All right. Last question. Oh, okay. Two more. I'll take you and then.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Mensah. Yes, I think in conceptualizing Gatung's theory of imperialism to any issue in Africa, we should also look at the gap created by Gatung's theory. And what is this gap? Now, there is another class that exists in Africa that the Gatung's theory ignored. And this is what I'll refer to as the lumping proletariats. The periphery of the periphery of the periphery. These are the jobless youths who care about themselves. For the moment, their existence, they don't think about tomorrow. So you discover that there is another crisis between the periphery of the periphery and the periphery of the periphery of the periphery. Now, you see that Gatung's theory is limited to the disjointedness between the periphery of the periphery and the periphery of the center. So we should also look at the issues of the lumping proletariats in addressing these socioeconomic issues that exist in Africa. Thank you.
Second last, because I'm going to squeeze in one for each one of you myself.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, but a contribution. I want to thank Professor Chris Ezike so very much because your paper, to my address very fundamental problem or challenges to Africa's development. Because you cannot achieve Africa's development if you do not fix right the states in Africa. The foundation of African states, purely I want to refer to it as strategies of the colonial masters. The foundation of the states were not designed to better the citizens of the states, even at the attainment of independence. And so the successors to the colonial masters have carried on with that style that we are bequeathed to them. And in carrying on with that style, the problem and challenges of diversity stares at our faces. And that is a fundamental issue. Take, for instance, Nigeria as a state with over 250 ethnic groups. Such a diversity, if appropriate, but unfortunately, the diversity is rather promoting ethnicity. And the consequences of this ethnic approach takes precedence in leadership recruitment process or democracy. And so you will agree there is a strong correlation between democracy, leadership, and development. So in an environment where choice of leaders is mainly determined by ethnicity, so it follows that representation is limited to the interests of the ethnic group of origin of the representative. And so it's not able to provide the desired development. And that is what Professor has consistently referred to as the popular choice theory. And so it is a fundamental issue, and that is why you just said Nigeria had 2 conferences. It's more than 2. In 1978, there was 1. Yes. No, but we have to start, because that's the foundation. In 1978, there was 1. In 1994-95, there was yet another under General Sani Abacha. In 1983, there was 1. Even in 2014, There was one under Goodluck Jonathan. And so all of the conferences, okay, I just omitted one, 1988 and 1999, there were conferences. The whole of these conferences, by any name and style they are couched, national conference, constitutional conference, all directed towards building hegemony and nation building, but it has always resisted. And so what is the solution? If we must fix states in Africa right to attain development, then we must go back to the basics to decouple, to unbundle that foundation on which the states in Africa were conceived and bequeathed to our nationalists at the attainment of independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow, I've resolved my questions I had for each one of you. I'll make them my comments right at the end. And it's a very difficult position that I'm taking because of time. Yeah, Prof?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the contributions that you have made. And I think it's a learning process for all of us. I'm learning a lot, especially from our junior brother Nigerians. You know, Nigeria, you are a junior brother. We were born before, we were born 57, you were born 60. You were born big. That's why, so we just... Yeah. Or any challenge? No. Yeah. Okay, on a more serious note, Bros, you asked a question about why the East are doing better than us. You know, Ghana had the same independence with South Korea the same day, 1957, 6th March. And we go to South Korea, we went there recently for the exam. I was so ashamed. Why are they able to do better than us? I think one of the key things is that we have nationalist leaders who were focused on development agenda. In Ghana, we had Jerry Rawlings, who ruled for about 19 years. He had all the time to bring in some discipline that the South, or if you want the East had, that Africa we don't have. Discipline. And I think discipline is one of the things. And if you have disciplined leadership, it also translates to limitation on corruption. But unfortunately, our leaders I would say in Africa, a lot of them are indisciplined, and they are based on their public choice theory. I also bring again what they get into their pocket, what they get into their family, what they get into their friends, what they get into their patrimonial status. That is one of the things I would say that leads into where we find ourselves now. We are hoping and praying that future leaders will be better than we have now. But I say we are hoping and praying.
Can I interject?
Yes, sir.
In the context of the modernity you presented.
Yes, sir.
Yes. In the context of the theory of semi-half everything.
Yes.
That political elite is another variable. It's fine.
Yes.
But you want to tell me that variable is more powerful than any. Say, suppose Nyerere, he tried to break this modernity. He was disciplined, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he couldn't make the break. Why? That's what I'm asking. Let's not.
I'm not going to allow it again. Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Okay. You see, first and foremost, talking about Nyerere, our Mwalimu, and you know, Mwalimu Nyerere have all the ideas and all the things that you need to, but did he was he able to build a team that shared his vision, that carried on what he had as compared to the East? I don't think so. In the East, this is where we are going as a country. And then if you look, and they carry everybody along with them. I don't want to digress too much. The biggest church we've ever had in the world is in South Korea. You know that the biggest church, I've forgotten the name of the guy. Sorry, I've forgotten the name of it. But one of the biggest church we had. We're talking about, people are complaining about churches in Nigeria. But biggest church there, if you talk about the automobile industry, they are there. He carried the people along with them. You can do this, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that. And they move as a country. Look at our brothers in Botswana. They carry the people along with them. How many students from Botswana goes to study in Europe and they don't come back? As compared to Ghana, as compared to Nigeria, even to South Africa and the rest of the country. Botswana, when they go, they come back. But ours is not.
40 seconds to wrap up.
Okay, quickly. Boss asked a question about federalism system. In Ghana, we operate unitary state because the country is a very small one. During independence, there was a big debate whether we should go federalism or go unitary. We operate unitary state. So the center in our Accra controls everything. But the point is that we want to ensure that there's uniformity or harmonized development. So we should send some resources to some people in their districts so that they can determine exactly what they need, not plan in Accra. So this is where the money was meant for the people to do that. But unfortunately, the elite has gone around the same money, trying to put the same money in their pocket. It's very sad if you don't have time. They supply tractors to people, they don't need tractors. They buy road equipment to people who don't need the road equipment. This is why, and simply because they can get their cuts, and 10%, you got Ghana, we call it 10%. I don't know what you call it in Nigeria. It's 10%. So this also leads us there. My time is so short, but I can.
It's part of the lead.
It's,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Madame,
Oui.
energy transition.
Oui. Pour répondre à monsieur, par rapport à l'inabordabilité des prix de l'électricité en Afrique de manière générale,
Regarding the affordability of electricity in Africa in general,
l'une des solutions proposées, c'est la promotion, l'appui et la vulgarisation des inventions frugales au niveau local.
one of the solutions is just the vulgarization, the promotion of
De l'abordabilité des prix.
of the use of local energy as well, to make it easier for the locals.
Parce qu'on a vu que produire de l'électricité, c'est très simple. Avec l'urine, on peut produire de
It
l'électricité.
is
Avec
easy
les
to
plantes
produce
également, certaines
electricity.
plantes et même des déchets, on peut produire de l'électricité. Ce
We
que
have green, today we have natural resources that we can use, such as green and stuff, just to produce electricity.
Et l'exemple le plus patent, c'est en Ouganda, il y a eu des inventions récentes, des inventions technologiques.
And Uganda today, you have new
Au
inventions
Kenya,
such as
au
biomass and all of that,
Sénégal
and in
également.
Kenya and
Mais il y a
Senegal as
l'absence
well.
de vulgarisation de ces inventions.
But it's the lack of promotion of those new inventions that we have here in Senegal.
Parce qu'il y a la dimension géoéconomique de l'électricité.
Because there is the geo-economical dimension that should be taken into account
Parce
as
que la
well.
production de l'électricité au carrefour des énergies fossiles, l'uranium, les énergies renouvelables, en général, l'Afrique constitue un marché pour ces différentes sources d'énergie.
Usually, Africa is not necessarily the producer, but more like the consumer.
Et ces politiques-là, ces programmes, la mise en œuvre de ces programmes sont trop coûteux et ça impacte sur l'abordabilité des prix de
And the
l'électricité.
implementation of their programs are expensive, and then it will impact as well on the
Donc la
cost of the
solution, c'est
electricity.
la vulgarisation des inventions technologiques locales.
So the solution is just the vulgarization, the promotion of local ingenuity and local production.
Monsieur Seck, tout à l'heure, vous parlez d'une certaine autonomie par rapport aux buzzwords en général. Et là, c'était l'hypothèse de départ, la définition de la souveraineté, ce n'est pas autonomie, cette dichotomie entre dépendance, autonomie. Mais cette dimension relationnelle est une évidence dans ce contexte des politiques publiques transnationales. Donc, on ne peut pas parler de dépendance, d'autonomie. Mais comment affirmer cette souveraineté dans cette nouvelle réalité?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, it's because there's another, the panel at 12 o'clock, they're going there. So we all leave here and also go and join them shortly. So we can afford to take a few minutes like we've done.
So the next session is in another room, not here?
Not here. No,
Okay.
this is free. We're
Okay.
free.
Okay.
The next session is up there. So we join them, anyone who wants to join. Okay, so thank you very much, Frank, for that question, which Isaac has tried to answer. In my paper, I did articulate that not all African states perform poorly, okay? There were some like Botswana and Mauritius that have performed excellently well over time since independence, despite the similar colonial roots that they have with the rest of the continent. Then conversely also, there are countries that were never colonized in Africa, Liberia and Ethiopia, but they are, but yet they are in the same bracket with those that were colonized and are performing poorly. So this is the limitation of my perverse state formation theory, right? But then it leads me to the question that he asked: what accounts for that, for this differentiation? Because your question is essentially, how do you explain Southeast Asia? Whether it be South Korea, whether it be Singapore, Malaysia, these countries that have done so well, the Southeast Asian tigers, if you remember in the 90s. The answer is what he said, is what I call in my paper the leadership agency, right? But then you pose the second question that I'm now going to respond to. That question, the answer to that question is really one, the external factor, okay, which was in the context of the Cold War. Nyerere could not do the kind of things that Lin Chun-yong was doing in Singapore, or I forget the other guy's name, in South Korea too, what they were doing, because they aligned early on with the West, with liberalism. Whereas Nyerere was aligning with socialism and Russia. That's what also led to Kwame Nkrumah being removed from office, because Kwame Nkrumah and Nyerere were in the same school of thought that we do not need to be taught democracy by the West. You understand? So that is a factor. I'm not saying it's the ultimate factor. Then also, these countries had national dialogues. All of them, whether it's South Korea, whether it's Malaysia. In fact, I was in a conference in Malaysia in 2021. The Prime Minister came to that conference and we asked him, what is the differentiating factor? You came to Nigeria in the 1980s to collect palm fronds from Nigeria. You took those palm fronds from Nigeria, went back to Malaysia, and you are now the biggest producer of palm oil, more than the Nigeria you got it from. And he said, the little things that we have done right, we do. And that's how we progress. But that one factor was that there was a national dialogue. I was in that conference with my wife. I'm really sorry to take this time. We entered the car from the airport. By the way, at the airport in Malaysia, there is no private taxi. All the taxis are run by government. From the airport, they drive you. You wait your turn, no matter who you are, big or small. So when we got into the thing, my wife ate some things from the plane. She was chewing some things and wanted to throw the throw the thing through the window. And then this driver was driving. He was looking at us through the mirror. And he said, oh, no. And then he stopped the vehicle. And I was surprised by his reaction. He now said, I'm sorry, I was supposed to give you a bin. Every car has a bin. Wow. That you are supposed to put inside the bin. So I said, okay, fine, he gave us. Then I said, but I'm curious, your reaction, the way you said no, and you stopped the car, I'm curious. Why? What is the thinking behind this behavior? And he said, the Malay dream. The Malay dream. And so what is the Malay dream? I've read about it, but I wanted to hear a taxi driver explain it to me. And he said, no, everybody was part of that dream. They came together and formed, like in Zanzi, the rainbow nation that Mandela tried to put. Because remember, states are political communities. They are imagined political communities. They are imagined. You come and say, I want to have a rainbow nation. You imagine it, and then you have the fortitude and the leadership and the humility to take people through to achieve that vision. So he said that they went into it, and even a taxi driver understands, a cleaner understands, the prime minister understands that each one of us, we are part of this dream, and each one of us has a role to play in the making of that dream. So that's how you see your role as a taxi driver, your role as a lecturer, your role as a prime minister in the formation and then building of the state. So that national dialogue factor is really, really, really very important. So just because of time, I just want to say, of course, this then applies to the kind of social democracy, the kind of democracy we want to answer in terms of that guy's question, but it's not even paying attention. So I will just give an answer to just contribution to say, and it's just a way to align. I know you want to try and bring them together. To align his paper, he talks about the Gatung's theory. And I'm saying that the Gatung's theory is not different from elite theory. Okay? The elite theory that talks about the inner core and the outer core. What brings the two together is what I call harmonization of interest. Because if you study the two theories, they're really saying the same thing. And for me, Gatung's theory aligns with classical imperialism by Karl Marx and dependency theory of Andegonda Frank, and all of this aligns with decoloniality theory of Gashenu Ndlovu and Maldonado Torres from Latin America. Those are the ones that form decoloniality. If you look at it, it all aligns, but the explanatory factor really is that social contract. That's the missing bit of it. I'll stop there, but we'll talk about it inside.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I think the key for me around your presentation, it's important to determine what are the domestic nuances that affect energy policy. For example, in South Africa, the issue is not, and Australia, by the way, the issue is not just creating enough or security of supply. The issue is also the politics of regional development. So, for example, in the Eastern Cape, my province, where it's the poorest province, the identification of fossil fuels sources is the difference between whether the province develops as it explores these energy resources. So the issue is not just the energy in relation to climate change, but also energy as a potential for regional development, among other things. So that's the one thing I wanted to say. The other ones, Prof, I think for me, it's this issue, and this is our closing remarks, by the way, it's this issue of the so what, ne? So what must happen to deliver either the social contract or what would be assumed to be arising? So for example, how in the Sahel that question has been answered has been by the rise of so-called benevolent dictators, and who depart from an assumption that we know what is required and we are going to try and make the state to respond to that. But when those moments that the social contract was undertaken as you envisage, as you describe, it was mainly coming out of a conflict environment or coming out of a huge political rupture of sorts, and therefore the moment came for crafting that. Outside of that, but I align with you around this issue of purpose-driven leadership, outcomes-driven leadership, or transformational leadership, whether that assumes a dictatorial, authoritarian, or democratic form. And then for you, Prof, that question for me about the lumpen proletariat is huge, because what I was going to ask you, and in fact, when I was looking at your graph, the same way that we had a fees must fall in South Africa, we looked at a graph that was showing a particular trend, and when you looked at that graph, you could understand why we had fees must fall in 2015. I looked at your graph, partly I could understand why the past election was a highly fractious election, an election of high stakes. Yeah. But what I was going to ask you is, what do the periphery do? What are the implications of those deductions in the conflict in society? In South Africa, there's a rise of, and this comes from the lumpen proletariat, there's the rise of power seeker mafiosi, construction mafia, Zama. I think a guy from Ghana talked about the Merengesi, or the people in the informal miners. So you then have these people, Garamsey, yes, the groups that arise out of the lumpen proletariat that come in. Anyway, thanks, colleagues. We continue in one-on-one discussions, but an amazing panel. Again, to me, shows the diversity of our discipline: political science, political economy, the political economy of fiscal institutions, as well as the classics in terms of state theory and the social contract. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well done.
Hey, well done.
Well done. Well done.
In terms of like social policy and how it is
Augusta.